Hello again. Page 169 of This Freedom, Whence, John Wesley Bready. In the chapter Reassertion of the Christian Ethic, he's tackling economics. It is notable too that Wesley supported fair prices, a living wage, and honest, healthy employment for all. No one disliked mobs more than he. Yet, in his journal, in 1758, he records with admiration a high-handed act of economic justice by the rabble. The mob, he says, had been in motion all the day, but their business was only with the forestallers of the market, who had bought up all the corn far and near to starve the poor and load a Dutch ship which lay at the quay. But the mob brought it all out into the market and sold it for the owners at the common price. And this they did with all the calmness and composure imaginable, and without striking or hurting anyone. End of quote. In Wesley's experiments to provide employment for the unfortunates, it may fairly be presumed that he was dealing mostly with second or third class workmen who had to be patiently instructed in the craft set them. But they too had souls, so a definite principle guided his efforts. The produce of their labor he sold at the standard rate, and that being insufficient for a decent livelihood, he made it up to a reasonable living wage. For while there was plenty in the land, he regarded it a national disgrace that any should be denied the material necessities of a healthy, self-respecting life. How basic was this principle to him may be gauged from the fact that as late as August 1789, we find him again condoning the direct action of a mob. In Truro, on his way to the Society's preaching house, he found the street blocked by numberless tinners, stampeding for higher pay. He was compelled to retire and so preached at the other end of the town instead. Now a peevish man in his 87th year might have reacted bitterly to this industrial mob, which had thus upset his plans. So, not so Wesley. His journal entry depicts it as a huge multitude who, being nearly starved, were come to beg or demand an increase in their wages, without which they could not live. Obviously, therefore, he believed these workmen, like the African slaves, in resisting the suppression of their natural liberty, to be but asserting their natural rights. In brief, Wesley's economic and social teaching, the product of his religion, was based upon the following articles of faith. 1. The spiritual brotherhood of man under the fatherhood of a loving and moral God, who, with high purpose, has granted to his children a large degree of free will. 2. This free will, though necessary to the moral and spiritual development of man, is capable of dire abuse, thus causing perplexing social problems. 3. All social problems are fundamentally spiritual and ethical, and persons who fail to dedicate mental equipment and material power to spiritual ethical ends are enemies of the kingdom of God, antisocial citizens who needs must be restrained by humane law. 4. In a really Christian society, men will recognize that they are stewards of God, the creator and owner of all. Human possessions, accordingly, are a self-acquired delusion, and private riches a dangerous snare. Service, not material acquisitions, being the real standard of human attainment, fellowship, cooperation, and a truly equalitarian spirit are the genuine marks of a Christian society, wherein the strong, motivated by sympathy and love, will rejoice to assist their weaker brethren, as parents rejoice to assist their children. 5. Faith in the justice of God in heaven and in the immortality of the soul are essential inspirations of any stable, happy society. All human institutions, therefore, including those of politics and economics, must be impregnated with spiritual values if they are to serve the highest interests of man and fulfill the will of God. 6. If men persist in perverting the grace of free will, refusing to recognize that they are stewards of God and their brother's keepers, then providence must resort to catastrophic means to upset their vain plans and force them, in chastened mood, to build anew. Wesley, like Shaftesbury, his spiritual descendant, was a mighty social reformer. For by initiating and directing a marvelous spiritual movement, latent with moral imperatives, he opened the springs of human sympathy and understanding, which in turn inspired and nourished a glorious succession of social reforms. Ostrogorski, the continental political writer, in his Democracy, has glimpsed something of the high humanitarian influence of Wesley and the heroic succession of Christian crusaders whom the evangelical revival raised up. They appeal always and everywhere, he says, from the miserable reality to the human conscience. They make one see the man in the criminal and the brother in the Negro. They introduced, he avers, that is, Ostrogorski avers, a new personage into the social and political world of aristocratic England, the fellow man. And that fellow man, Ostrogorski predicts, never more will leave the stage. We'll see. I'll put a link into a video Vivian did on Victor Shepard's little article about the influence of this descendant, as Bready calls him, this descendant of Wesley, Lord Shaftesbury, who more than any man in Victorian England changed the world. And also a link to the playlist of this entire book. What has Christ been doing these 2,000 years? The next chapter is the spirit of equity and fellowship.